Why we ignore warnings until they become disasters. Intro. The iceberg was not the first warning. On the night of April 14th, 1912, the Titanic was moving through the North Atlantic at more than 20 knots. The sea was unusually calm. There was no moon, no waves breaking against ice, and no white foam around anything waiting in the dark. That mattered because a rough sea can betray an iceberg. Waves slap against it. Foam gathers at its base. The ocean points and yells at the thing trying to kill you. That night, the ocean kept its mouth shut. High above the deck, in the crow's nest, Lookout Frederick Fleet stared towards the black water. He did not have any binoculars, though there were binoculars on the ship. They were locked away. The key had apparently left the Titanic in the pocket of David Blair, the ship's original second officer, who had been reassigned just before the voyage. So Fleet had his eyes, the cold, and the job of seeing the future about a minute before the ship reached it. Then he saw it, a dark mass directly ahead. Fleet rang the warning bell 3 times and telephoned the bridge. Iceberg, right ahead. The ship turned. The engines reversed. For a moment, it looked like it was working, but it wasn't. The ship scraped along the iceberg's underwater edge. It didn't split dramatically in half at first. That would be more than 2.5 hours later. There was no explosion, no instant collapse, no screaming crowd understanding all at once that history had just changed direction. The damage was quieter than that. Compartments began filling underwater. Water moved through the ship with a kind of patient confidence. Below the waterline, the most magnificent passenger liner in the world was learning that the ocean didn't care how magnificent it was. What makes the Titanic terrifying is not that no one imagined that it could hit an iceberg. They did. The ship had received multiple ice warnings during the voyage. At least several reached Captain Edward Smith on the day of the collision. One warning from the Baltic placed ice near Titanic's path. The danger had not been silent. It had been translated into messages, delivered by wireless, placed into human hands, and then absorbed by a system that just kept moving. And that's what this is all about. Not the Titanic itself, not shipbuilding trivia, not whether a floating door could hold 2 people. The subject is what happens inside human beings when a warning asks us to stop. Because a warning is not just information. A warning is a request, a demand. It says to slow down, lose time, lose money, lose prestige, disappoint people, embarrass the boss, cancel the launch, evacuate the town, shut down the plant, tell the public that the fairy tale may not be true. And that's when the brain starts negotiating. We like to imagine humans respond to danger rationally, or at least reflexively, and sometimes we do. But the human mind is also built with much older systems: normalcy bias, optimism bias, authority pressure, social proof, loss aversion, and the deep instinct to keep belonging to the group that's still acting calm. The disaster is in the future. The punishment for stopping is in the now. That gap has killed a lot of people. Chapter 1. The ship that made danger feel impolite. The Titanic was not just a ship. It was a floating argument about modern civilization. It had electric lights, elevators, wireless telegraphy, luxury suites, dining rooms, lounges, Turkish baths, a heated swimming pool, and enough social hierarchy to make the open Atlantic feel properly ordered. First-class passengers could stroll through rooms that looked less like transportation and more like a posh hotel that had learned to hover. This matters because prestige is not just decorative. Prestige changes how people process risk. A rickety fishing boat can look fragile. A luxury liner with grand staircases and wealthy passengers feels like it has negotiated some private arrangement with physics. Titanic had been designed with watertight compartments. It could survive certain kinds of flooding. The problem was what humans did with the feeling that created. Safety features can become dangerous when people start treating them like permission. The ship carried lifeboats, but not enough for everyone aboard. This was legal under the regulations of the time, which is one of history's many ways of saying the paperwork survived just a bit longer than the people did. The law just hadn't kept pace with the size of the ships being built. That sounds like a technical failure, but it's also a very social one. Regulations often lag behind ambition because ambition shows up with money, prestige, and a schedule. Regulation shows up clutching a clipboard full of objections and the charisma of a filing cabinet. On April 14th, ice warnings came in. The Titanic didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. It didn't behave like a fragile object moving through lethal darkness. It continued at speed. This isn't because people then were stupid, or because Captain Smith was some cartoon of arrogance. Smith had spent a lifetime safely guiding ships across the ocean. This was reportedly going to be his final command before retirement. The lazy explanation teaches us nothing about ourselves. The real explanation is more uncomfortable. The Titanic was propelled by coal, steam, and confidence. The ship was new. The company was prestigious. The captain was experienced. The passengers were important. The technology was impressive, and the route was familiar enough to feel manageable. The warnings were real, but the whole situation whispered, "Everything's fine." And though it was just a whisper, it had authority because it came from one of the brain's favorite shortcuts, normalcy bias. Normalcy bias tells us that because life has continued normally so far, it will probably continue normally. Most of the time, that's useful. You can't jump out of bed and swing a bat at every strange noise, cancel every trip because the clouds are dark, or evacuate every building because someone thinks they smell smoke 3 floors away. And that's okay. Dave in sales spilled his coffee on the burner again. Normalcy keeps us functional. But normalcy is dangerous when the unusual thing has already begun and the brain keeps reaching for yesterday. The Titanic was not sailing through a spreadsheet of calculated risk. It was sailing through assumptions. The captain had crossed the Atlantic before. The crew had handled warnings before. Ice was a thing that ships pass by. The night was calm. The ship was enormous. And the schedule mattered. The White Star Line advertisements were beautiful. And when a warning enters a confident system, the warning has to do more than just be true. It has to become stronger than the system's desire to continue. Because stopping feels like an overreaction until the disaster arrives. Afterward, everyone asks why no one stopped. Beforehand, stopping looks overdramatic, expensive, embarrassing, and probably unnecessary. This is one of the cruelest asymmetries in human life. If you stop and nothing happens, you look paranoid or foolish. If you don't stop and disaster happens, you look negligent or foolish. The obvious decision is often only obvious after the danger has passed. Before then, it competes against pride, money, habit, hierarchy, and the quiet social pressure of everyone around you continuing to behave as if the iceberg is just theoretical. The Titanic didn't just hit ice. It hit the human difficulty of treating future danger as real before it has the courtesy to become visible. Chapter 2. The dam everyone had learned to live below. On May 31, 1889, it was raining hard in western Pennsylvania. Above the city of Johnstown sat Lake Conemaugh, held back by the South Fork Dam. The lake had originally been built for a canal system. Later, it was modified and used by the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, a private retreat for wealthy Pittsburgh men. Downstream, people lived beneath a wall of risk. This is another thing humans are very good at, living below danger until danger becomes scenery. A dam above a town, a pile of mining waste above a school, a factory beside a neighborhood, a mountain sliding towards a reservoir. At first, people worry, then they adapt. Then the danger becomes part of the background, like bad wallpaper. The South Fork Dam had problems. It had been altered and neglected. Its spillway capacity was limited. Earlier concerns had been raised. The basic fact of the place was obvious. An enormous amount of water sat above a populated valley, and the thing holding it back was not getting more reassuring with age. But the lake was useful. The club was pleasant. The scenery was beautiful. Powerful people had reasons to believe the situation was under control, or at least under control enough. That phrase, under control enough, deserves its own small memorial. It's one of the most dangerous phrases in civilization. Not safe, not fixed, not examined honestly, just acceptable. As the rain continued, the dam came under pressure. Men tried to repair and reinforce it. Warnings were sent downstream. But Johnstown had heard warnings before. False alarms are not harmless. They train people. If a town hears the dam may break, and the dam does not break, the next warning has to fight the memory of embarrassment. The human brain updates badly in that situation. It doesn't say, we survived because risk is probabilistic and warnings can be serious even when disaster does not occur. The brain says, we've heard this before. That is availability bias working with normalcy bias. The most available memory is not the hidden structural risk. It's the last time people panicked and nothing happened. Then the South Fork Dam failed. A wall of water tore down the valley towards Johnstown. The disaster killed more than 2,000 people. Afterwards, the risk looked obvious. Of course the dam was dangerous. Of course the modifications mattered. Of course the people downstream were vulnerable. And of course the warning should have carried more weight. But of course is cheap after the fact. Human nature lives before the fact. Before the disaster, the dam was not a moral lesson. It was a feature of life. It had owners, routines, paperwork, assumptions, excuses, and a community that learned to keep going. And that's how risk becomes invisible, not by hiding, by staying visible for so long that people stop seeing it. Every family has a smaller version of this: the debt nobody discusses, the strange symptom somebody keeps explaining away, the business problem everyone works around, the relationship tension that becomes normal, the employee everyone knows is dangerous but too valuable to confront, the roof leak, the legal exposure, the safety shortcut, the machine that always does that. Humans do not ignore warnings because they are hidden. We ignore them because they become familiar, and familiarity has a way of putting danger in a comfortable chair. Chapter 3. The Tip Above the School. On the morning of October 21, 1966, children in Aberfan, Wales went to school. Pantglas Junior School sat below the hillside where the National Coal Board had piled waste from mining. Above the village were colliery spoil tips, dark artificial hills made from the leftovers of industry. One of them, tip number 7, had been placed over natural springs. That sentence contains the disaster in miniature: waste above a village, water underneath it, a school below it. The danger had not been completely unknown. The tip had shown signs of instability. Smaller slips had happened. Local concerns had been raised. Water was part of the landscape and part of the problem. But again, the risk had become normal. Industrial communities are often asked to live beside danger as the price of someone else's necessity. The mines provide work. The system provides wages. The institution provides explanations. The mountain of waste becomes part of the skyline. People adapt because they have to. The brain is not built to experience constant alarm forever. If the danger remains and nothing happens today, the mind lowers the volume. Otherwise, daily life becomes impossible. That's why chronic danger is so difficult. It trains both the public and the institution to treat risk as background. Then heavy rains came. The saturated spoil liquefied and slid down the hillside. At about 9:15 in the morning, the black mass hit the valley and engulfed the school and nearby houses. 144 people died. 116 were children. There are stories where the facts are already heavy enough. They don't need decoration. The official tribunal later said that the disaster could and should have been prevented. It placed blame on the National Coal Board and described ignorance, ineptitude, and failures of communication. That phrase, failure of communication, can sound bloodless, but bloodless language is one way institutions survive contact with what they've done. Aberfan reveals another reason humans ignore warnings. Responsibility diffuses. When danger belongs to everyone, it can feel like it belongs to no one. One person knows about water. Another knows about the tip. Another hears local complaints. Another understands mining operations. Another controls policy. Another controls money. Another assumes someone else has checked. The warning is spread across desks, departments, memories, maps, habits, and conversations. No single person feels the whole weight of it at once. This is not just a mining problem. It's a human organization problem. The larger the system, the easier it becomes for danger to travel without urgency. A warning enters the office as a complaint. It reaches another office as a technical issue. It reaches another as a budget problem. It reaches another as something to review later. By the time it reaches the people in power, it has been softened into administrative fog. And fog is useful. Fog lets anyone say that they couldn't see clearly. The villagers saw more clearly than the system did because they lived under the tip. And that's another pattern. The people closest to the danger often understand it before the people with the authority to make changes do. But authority usually gets to decide what kind of knowledge counts. A local fear is anecdotal. A worker's concern is informal. A parent's worry is emotional. A resident's complaint is inconvenient. A technical report is official. A tragedy is conclusive. Human beings do this in families too. The person closest to the problem is often told they're too sensitive, too negative, too dramatic, too emotional, too close to it. Then, after the collapse, everyone discovers that being close to the problem was the qualification. Chapter 4. The Mountain That Was Already Moving. In northern Italy, in the valley of the Vajont, engineers built a dam so high and elegant that it looked like human reason had defeated the landscape. The Vajont Dam rose between the steep walls of rock, an enormous concrete arc holding back a reservoir in the Alps. The structure itself was extraordinary, and that became part of the problem. Beautiful engineering can hypnotize the people who depend on it. A dam can be brilliantly built and still be in the wrong conversation with the mountain beside it. The mountain was Monte Toc. Its name has often been connected to local words suggesting something broken, rotten, or unstable. Whether the folklore is perfect or not, the physical reality was clearer. The slope was unstable. There were signs. Cracks appeared. Landslides occurred. The mountain moved. Engineers and geologists debated the danger. Water levels in the reservoir affected the slope. The more the reservoir rose and fell, the more the mountain seemed to answer. This is where another part of human wiring enters: commitment. Once people have invested enormous money, identity, labor, and public prestige into a project, the project stops being merely a project. It becomes a story people need to protect. The dam exists, the plans exist, the reputations exist, the electric power is expected. The institution has already told the public that this is progress. At that point, a warning is not just a warning, it's an attack on the story. And humans defend stories with the same machinery we use to defend ourselves. On October 9, 1963, the mountain fell. A massive landslide dropped into the reservoir. The dam itself largely held. That detail is almost unbearable. The engineering monument survived, but the people below it did not. The landscape displaced an enormous wave of water that surged over the dam and down into the valley, destroying communities below, including Longarone. Around 2,000 people died. The dam did not fail in the way people expected. The system failed in the way people often fail, by defining the problem too narrowly. Is the dam strong? Yes. Is the concrete magnificent? Yes. Can the wall withstand enormous pressure? Apparently. But the real question is not whether the dam could hold water. The real question was what the water would do to the mountain. This is a very human mistake. We focus on the part of the problem that makes us feel competent. Then the ignored part becomes the disaster. A company asks whether the product works, but not whether the incentives will corrupt it. A government asks whether the plan is legal, but not whether people will trust it. A family asks whether everyone is behaving politely, but not what silence is costing. A leader asks whether the machine is impressive, but not whether the mountain beside it is moving. Vajont is terrifying because the warning was not a single dramatic message. It was a pattern. The mountain kept speaking in the moment: cracks, slips, measurements. But patterns are easy to argue with when acting on them would be expensive. And that's the brain again. Immediate cost feels concrete. Future catastrophe feels abstract. The budget is concrete. The schedule is concrete. The public promise is concrete. The humiliation of stopping is concrete. The dead are still imaginary until they're not. Chapter 5. The gas that arrived before the warning. Late on the night of December 2nd, 1984, something began going wrong inside the Union Carbide pesticide plant in Bhopal, India. Water entered a storage tank containing methyl isocyanate, a highly toxic chemical used in pesticide production. A reaction began. Heat and pressure rose. Safety systems that should have helped prevent or reduce catastrophe were malfunctioning, disabled, overwhelmed, or not in proper use. Around the plant, hundreds of thousands of people lived close by. That matters. Industrial risk often has a geography. The benefits and the dangers do not always lie at the same address. Factories provide jobs, profits, products, development, and national ambition. They also create danger, and danger tends to settle near people with the least power to move away from it. As pressure rose in Bhopal, the plant became a machine for converting ignored risk into human exposure. The gas escaped. Many people learned that there was a danger by feeling it in their bodies before any clear public warning reached them. That's perhaps the most brutal version of a failed warning system, when the first message arrives as injury. Bhopal became one of the worst industrial disasters in history. Thousands died. Hundreds of thousands were exposed or injured. The consequences continued long after the night itself. The plant had warning signs before the disaster in the broader sense that failing systems usually do: maintenance problems, safety concerns, cost pressures, operational weaknesses, and equipment not ready for the scale of what could happen. But warnings inside organizations have to compete with incentives. Safety costs money before disaster. Disaster costs money after safety fails. That timing difference is everything. Before disaster, a safety expense looks optional to the people rewarded for reducing costs. After disaster, it looks obvious to everyone standing in the wreckage. The brain has a version of this too. Humans are not naturally good at paying certain costs now to prevent uncertain pain later. We can do it, but it requires culture, discipline, rules, incentives, and leadership that rewards prevention even when prevention looks boring. Prevention has terrible marketing. A prevented disaster has no dramatic footage, no rescue, no memorial, no famous date, no leader standing before cameras saying, "Because we spent money early, nothing happened." Nothing happened is the entire achievement. But humans are bad at celebrating nothing. So prevention is easy to cut. Maintenance is easy to defer. Training is easy to rush. Inspections are easy to pencil in. Safety systems are easy to treat as expensive decorations until the night they become the only thing that matters. And this is not because everyone involved is a monster. Strangely enough, that explanation is too comforting. It lets the viewer escape. The deeper lesson is that normal people inside pressure systems can become very good at postponing reality. A valve problem becomes something to address after the break. A safety system becomes something to repair after production. A public warning becomes something to manage after certainty. A dangerous tank becomes something everyone assumes will remain stable because it remained stable yesterday. And there's the old machinery again. Normalcy bias, optimism bias, authority pressure, incentives. The brain discounts what has not happened yet. The organization discounts what does not improve the current report. And the community outside the fence trusts that someone with a badge, a title, a diagram, or a hard hat has made sure the danger is under control. Often someone has. Sometimes no one has. Conclusion. The future has terrible lobbyists. The Titanic received ice warnings. Johnstown people lived below a dam that people had reason to fear. Aberfan lived beneath a mountain of mining waste. Vajont mountain was moving before it fell. Bhopal's plant contained failing layers of protection before the gas escaped. These stories are different in scale, place, technology, and time, but the human mechanism keeps returning. Warnings ask us to pay now for a disaster that has not happened yet. And that's why they're so easy to negotiate with. The ship is still moving. The dam is still standing. The tip is still quiet. The mountain hasn't fallen. The plant is still operating. The meeting is still calm. The boss still wants progress. The budget still matters. The public story still sounds good. And everyone around you is still acting as if tomorrow will resemble yesterday. The brain likes that. Normalcy bias says the familiar world is probably the real one. Optimism bias says that the bad outcome probably will not happen to us. Social proof says that if everyone else is calm, calm must be intelligent. Authority bias says that people in charge must know more than we do. Loss aversion says the cost of stopping is definite, while the disaster is only possible. And this is why warnings often fail, not because they're silent, but because they arrive asking humans to betray the present for the sake of the future. And the present fights back. It fights with money, it fights with status, it fights with deadlines, embarrassment, and the fear of looking dramatic. It fights with a sentence that has probably preceded more disasters than any villain ever has. We've done it this way before. And that's why history matters here. Not because we're better than the people who missed the iceberg, lived below the dam, trusted the tip, trusted the mountain, or lived near the plant. Because we're built from the same material. We ignore the strange noise in the car. We postpone that medical appointment. We stay in the job after the warning signs become obvious. We explain away the friend, the leader, the company, the movement, the investment, the relationship, the institution. We mistake calm for safety. We mistake confidence for knowledge. We mistake yesterday for evidence. The lesson is not to panic at every warning. That would make life impossible. The lesson is to notice when the cost of acting feels more real than the danger of not acting. That is the danger zone. Because the warning may be uncertain, but the pressure to ignore it is often very, very clear. The costumes change, the machinery changes, the dashboards change, but human nature does not. The warning doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs a system brave enough to hear it before the water, the ice, the coal, the mountain, or the gas finishes the argument. Hey, thanks for watching my video. Please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see when I make more. I make these videos totally for free, and your support really helps the channel grow. You can also share this with someone you think will like it, check out the Amazon links to cool stuff in the description, and tip me if you feel so inclined. Venmo at History of Human Nature. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.